It's all yours.
Well, where I'm from, I guess in conventional terms, I was born in Chicago, and places I lived are Champaign, Illinois, where I went to college, and Peoria, Illinois, where I went to graduate school and then taught there art. Art's been my whole life. And then I taught for a while at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, and then in the Art Institute of Chicago, and now I'm in Austin, Texas, and I retired about 17 years ago. And I decided I would investigate either Buddhism or Judaism. And so I fell into both. Uh, and I decided for my second career after retirement, I would prepare myself for the next life. And then I got involved with Appamada, the Zen temple, and I decided, oh, I could still do things in this life. So that's kind of where I am. I see someone's from Decatur, Illinois, and my wife was from Monticello, Illinois, which is very close to Decatur. And it's great to be with you all. And if I could share, I have a keynote that I'm going to use for this talk. This is probably the best slide that you're seeing right now. But we'll go to the next one.
Not seeing anything quite yet.
I know that's because it's blank.
Ah,
And I guess you're supposed to start talks with a joke, right? So the first thing we'll discuss is getting beyond words and concepts. Gee, where do I go from here? Good, end of discourse. And I got up very early this morning, and then I laid down to take a nap, and I thought beyond words and concepts, that's kind of the problem, isn't it? So I started out with this title, and then I went to this title, From Beyond to Before. And we also talk about wisdom beyond wisdom as being, what we originally, I think, yearned for with enlightenment is wisdom, so we'd know all the answers, so we wouldn't have to read instructions, which I don't do, but my wife does it, so we get through things like that. But before words and concepts is kind of where I'm trying to go, and I get caught with each koan by going first to words and concepts and stories and assumptions and those kinds of things. So there's something, the photographer Edward Weston was really struck with this Zen saying. And so I heard it when I studied with his son, Brett Weston, in the 60s. Uh, Mountains are mountains, rivers are rivers. That's kind of our initial um, idea of the world. And then we discover with more study that mountains are not mountains, rivers are not mountains, rivers are not rivers, and we think we understand everything. And then we go to mountains are once again mountains, rivers are once again rivers. And that's been a really important teaching for me. An older cousin, Larry, who lived with us for a time, remembered that my dad was giving us puzzles. Word problems, along with math problems, were my favorite pastime. Fast forward to Zen. My first teacher told his students that everything has Buddha nature. Not knowing moo, but having a couple of dogs, I asked him if dogs had Buddha nature. He made a somewhat odd facial expression, but kindly didn't say, "That's your first koan." I immediately fell in love with koans. I felt they had something to teach me. Then I did a sesshin with a Rinzai Zen teacher. The koan was, "What is this?" Sometimes it's, "What is it?" And time after time I was wrung out before I barely opened my mouth. Why couldn't I figure out this apparently simple koan? We would line up in a, one after another and go in there and come out, go in, come out, go in, come out. I did take a koan class or two or three. They seemed esoteric and relied on a totally unfamiliar holy grail. Yet I was sufficiently intrigued to do a deep dive. When head student, I picked what seemed like a simple koan, only to discover there are no simple koans, and to also discover that they are all simple. Suzuki Roshi said, if it isn't a paradox, it isn't true. Yesterday, I asked our head student if there were any simple questions. I haven't found one yet. Maybe I'm coming to realize that I, not the questioner koan, make questions difficult. And I'm sure Al would agree with that I'm the problem. I chose a koan in which Buddha holds up a flower and Kassapa smiles. Every day I drew a picture with words about this koan, and I shared them in my head student Dharma talks. Imagination played a role here, but it wasn't the imagination of making things up. To the contrary, I was asked once how I reconciled my work with that of the realist, and I responded that I'm a realist. I express what I'm feeling. I don't like artists who make things up. It was about a year ago when I made the website for the Lay Zen Teachers Association. I worked with Al Rappaport and saw that he'd been teaching koans for several years. For about 6 months, I've been working with him, meeting him weekly. He started out by asking me where I felt the koan in my body. I didn't respond well to his question, but it did suggest that koans weren't discursive puzzles to solve. I've discovered how I feel about things by looking at my drawings of them. And that's been so from when I started as a teenager doing photography. I would look at the photograph and then I would know how I felt towards something. In fact, as I started looking at some of the earliest drawings I made of the koan, I realized I had been expressing more than I had at the time. What was Buddha saying when he held up the flower? Kashyapa understood and he smiled. The other monks didn't get the meaning. When Buddha really had to say something profound, he held up a flower. Likewise, when Kashyapa responded with a smile, he said more than all the grains of sand in the Ganges River. My commentary on the drawings was written after the drawing was made. I saw things in the drawings that I didn't initially see. Al would have me act out my response to the koan. Sometimes he would say, "You have it in the drawing." So then I'd look at the drawing again and let it whisper to me. And what was funny, I just mentioned this earlier to Al, someone who was helping me edit, making this into a book, and someone who was helping me edit said, instead of sometimes he would say, sometimes it would say, thinking that Al was AI. So here's a little koan that I found the other day. What comes twice in a week, but only once in a year? And you can feel kind of the movement in your brain, thinking about a week, and maybe you have a weekend and a weekday and a year, and you have months, and all this kind of mixed up thinking that you have. And Al keeps saying, it's right in front of you. It's there. And actually, I'm kind of going to break the rule and tell you what the secret is. I couldn't figure it out, but it's the E. Weeks has two E's and year has one E. But I just love this because it's so clear you don't have to know what a week is or a year is. This is one of the koans I did for the when I was head student for the Buddha held up a flower. Sometimes it is depicted as a pure white lotus, but I like it better when it is a lotus with roots dripping mud. That's who I was today when I led service and messed up the robe chant. There were hopefully some moments where the beautiful end of the flower was revealed, but the mud was there as well. The point is not to be a stone Buddha, nor to be a wild animal. And that's the whole deal of the middle way, which I think is the most difficult. In fact, my wife said that the other day. We were talking about the middle way, and she said that's so difficult. It is the pure white lotus and the mud, all in one bundle. That's why Kashyapa smiled, or not. I told one of my Zen teachers that I was worrying about 5 things. For those who know her, this was Peg. She said, "You certainly are worrying about lots of things." That was all I needed. And I made this piece for an art exhibit at the city hall, and it hung in front of the mayor's office for a year. And it was after the pipeline, which was going to go through some Indian grounds, and finally got diverted or stopped. I don't remember. The oil leak has been stopped. What can I do with my worry brain now? The koan I'm working on now is, where does the rain come from? Al said any 3-year-old can answer this. So I'm going to show it as the last slide. One important parable, Buddha's parable
I'm
to
not
me,
seeing
has
any.
been the
I'm not seeing
poisoned
any slide
arrow.
on the screen. Are
And
you?
I'll read it. A man is walking through a forest when a poisoned arrow suddenly strikes him. His companions rush to his side to pull it out and treat the wound, but the man stops them. He demands to know who shot this arrow, what is his name, and which village is he from? Is he tall or short? What kind of wood is the bow made of? And what bird did the feathers on the arrow come from? Before these questions can be answered, the man dies from the poison. A monk asks Joshu, a Chinese Zen master, has a dog Buddha nature or not? Joshu answered, Mu. And this is actually the first 2 drawings. The one on the left and the one on the right was a little later. I told my koan teacher that Mu was stuck in my gut, and that's the figure on the left. He failed me, of course. I was adjusting to the fact that I'd fail each week I met with him, and that was fine. X-lax didn't help either. Mu was stuck like a hard rock. By next week, I imagined I was in a Mu storm and it penetrated me. I remembered the song from the year we were married, 1969. Raindrops keep falling on my head. I was happy with Mu flowing through me, but still I failed. There was still a dualism between me and Mu. The cool thing about koan study is that if someone told you the answer, you'd probably still fail. Knowing about love or even the secret of a good relationship doesn't guarantee anything. Reading about going to Paris isn't the same as going to Paris. How does one have an experience of Mu? Paris was easier. And I don't know if I told Al, but somewhere up there, oh, there it is, the Book of Mu. I have a Book of Mu. It didn't help at all. So here I'm riding my dog, and the sun is Mu, and the dog is Mu, and I'm Mu. But there's also this separation between us and the rest of the world. Here it's more one Mu. One of the next koans I did was become one with the sound of a distant temple bell. I am the bell. It was distant until I heard it. And then I stepped into the bell and got showered with the sound, and the vibration of the bell jiggled me through and through. Soon there was a Dharma talk, and the words didn't stop but penetrated through the pores of my skin, making and shaking all my cells as the talk rained over me. I didn't listen in the same way that the fish don't know they're in water until they aren't. I think what this idea of distance, of something separated from you, I kept running into that with the koans. The same with the sailboat. How do you become one with a sailing boat? Well, let me tell you. Xing Ching Ming. In this not two, nothing is separate, and nothing in the world is excluded. We were talking about the Xing Ching Ming the other day, and all the wonderful teachings in Buddhism, and how they're right in front of us, but to get them probably takes 1,000 lifetimes. In the storm, one feels part of the boat as it rocks violently from side to side. I was thinking too earlier this morning about a time when it was beyond words. And I was walking with my neighbor, and he stepped into the street, and a car was swerving around the corner, and I grabbed him and pulled him out of the way. And there was no thought. It was more like when you're watching a squirrel. He's looking around, something's happened, and then he runs away. It was one of the most it was quite a memorable experience to go beyond words, because so often we're trying to, well, what shall I do now? What shall I ever do? That's from T.S. Eliot. This is a great lesson on what I can do, and hopefully if I stop fighting, there will be a little less war. This koan was about stop the fighting on the other side of the river. And this is the second version. Love afar is spite at home. I'm on the other side of the river. I'm the one fighting. If we all acknowledge that, there would be peace. Going to where I am, how can I stop fighting? How can I become with the enemy? How can I be the one on the other side? How can I not be the one on the other side? I am the one who is you. I am he. This koan is save the hungry ghost, but somehow I remembered it and put feed the hungry ghost. I am it, and maybe I can be fed, but the feeding will not curb any hunger because my mouth is small and my neck is thin. The end of craving does not come from abundance. That's probably, to me, the biggest mistake people make is thinking that they can end craving by getting what they want. And yet we realize this over and over and over again. I mean, it's the experience of every moment in our life that we just find a new thing to crave for, or the original craving comes back. Yesterday, I thought about how the fulfillment of a desire doesn't end craving. Maybe it does for the first few bites, but then we stop worrying about how much the ice cream costs, or whether it will make us fatter, or whether it will give us cavities. So we can't even enjoy the ice cream, or we might, and then instantly start craving something else. Hunger isn't ended by feeding. Suffering is caused by craving, but is ended by other means than eating, i.e. the Eightfold Path. This is another, I think it's part of a sutra. The Buddha picked up a few leaves in his hand and asked the monks, which are more numerous, the few leaves in my hand or those overhead in the forest? The monks replied, the leaves in your hand are few, Lord. Those overhead in the forest are far more numerous. The Buddha then said, in the same way, those things I have known with direct knowledge, but have not taught, are far more numerous than what I have taught. And why haven't I taught them? Because they are not connected with the goal. do not relate to the rudiments of the holy life, and do not lead to disenchantment, dispassion, cessation, peace, direct knowledge, awakening, and nibbana. So it's so tempting, especially with our access to so much information, to get caught there and realize that much of it is not going to lead to disenchantment, dispassion, cessation, peace, direct knowledge, awakening, and nirvana. Uh, so what does that is a big question. This is a koan about when the world was created. And I immediately went to an atlas globe that my parents had when I was a kid and thought of that as the world. And my world was created when I had my first thoughts. But before we have conscious thoughts, we are set up with preconscious thoughts. That was the beginning. And I did this drawing. I thought, hey, that looks a lot like Paul Klee. So I found the Paul Klee drawing that was in my head the other day. When the world was created, what was God like? The second I refers to I, and a messy dualism is born. Should I adopt a pronoun like they? Sometimes with these koans, I feel like screaming, stop messing with me. And this is the koan I'm working on now. Where does the rain come from? And Al said any 3-year-old can answer this. So I was in 2 different restaurants. There were 3-year-olds. So I asked their parents if I could talk to their kid. And the first kid said, sky. And the second kid said, the sky. And I think that these 3-year-olds were way beyond their age. And I've been waiting for it to rain. Finally, it rained. So I went out in the rain and I started getting wet. I realized I don't look up when it's raining. And and then I asked my 12-year-old grandson, and he said, the ocean. And so I said, is that your mind or your heart that's saying the ocean? And he said, my mind. And I said, what does your heart say? And he says, my heart said God. So I drew me in the picture, and then I had God sprinkling me with a watering can. And I realized I don't look up when it's raining. And that's so interesting. And then I asked my son, where does the rain come from? And he said his memory, which I thought was interesting. And I told him like all the different thoughts I had about where the rain comes from and about the 3-year-old and the 12-year-old. And then at the end of the conversation, he said, I'm still there. I'm still with that comes from your memory. And I thought that was interesting. In the Lotus Sutra 2,000 years ago, the Buddha sends Dharma rain, empowering all beings to become Buddha. Al keeps telling me, well, look at the drawing, look at the drawing. That's where the rain comes from. And that image of me getting wet. And I think my wife said, or someone said, that looks like porcupine quills. But sometimes we have that feeling when we're out in the rain. And I showed this to one friend, and she said, when she was a little girl, she lives in England. Her mother, where, it rains a lot, her mother got her a transparent umbrella so she could look up and see the rain. And I thought that was so neat. Then I remembered the flag and wind koan. How what moves is the mind. So the rain comes from me, not from the sky, not from the ocean or God. And I think this is what my son was getting to too. When you're asked a question like that, we immediately go to our memory bank and think, oh, where does it come from? But that's why I think these 3-year-olds were not good subjects for the questioning. Maybe I have to go to 2-year-olds, or maybe just like I did, go out in the rain. My normal Dharma talk would involve a lot of exchange in kinds of, I would ask questions and we would talk and things like that. But now there's an opportunity, if you will, to talk.
All right. If anybody has any questions or discussion points, feel free to chime in.
Yes, thank you.
How long have you been drawing? It was interesting. It's interesting to see that this is probably new, right? Interpreting the koans. So, what
Well,
inspired that?
yeah, I started drawing the koans maybe 5 years ago when I was head student, but I've been drawing since maybe the fifth grade, so almost all my life. And I'll show you here just a second. I need to, if I can turn on self view.
Oh, I think your background's on. It's kind of blurring the background.
Yeah, I'll fix that, and then I can. So up there in the middle, you'll see a picture I did in maybe undergraduate school. So so my art has not changed much from my whole life, and I feel myself really fortunate not to have any talent. Because people with talent, they imagine like a talented musician or something. They can play, they can do any kind of music. But someone like maybe Janis Joplin just had Janis Joplin. That's what she could do. I don't know. Maybe she could do 100 things. There was one French singer. I can't think of her name, but I got a album or something of her work, and I was so disappointed that the one I loved so much, she could do 50 different things. So anyway, this is the drawing I've been making over and over and over again, and it's tough when you have talent. I mean, imagine if you can do 1,000 things, what would you do then? And I think it's so difficult for artists today. They see so much stuff, and we didn't have that kind of exposure. And I asked one of my teachers once, I said, "How come you didn't expose us to more stuff?" And he said, "I didn't want to confuse you." And when our print quality, he was a photography teacher, when our print quality got bad, he would take us to the museum and show us good prints. He was a stickler for that. But he really wanted us to find our way. And I was lucky in both undergraduate and graduate art school to be able to develop my own voice.
Yeah, Kim, I'll just say that it's really been a pleasure working with you and seeing what you create. I agree with you on that point, that last point you just made about too much. I think that, or I should say, I feel that we can only process so much information, and we're bombarded with more information than we really can process. And when it comes to something like what you're talking about, um, which I feel you have an iconic style, which I really love, that sometimes too much is not more, it's less, because then we were not able to really focus on what we can really create indigenously without relying on uh, input from the outside. Could you say a little bit about that creative process? Because I feel that happens in the artwork that you do, which I think is quite unique. And that development of that, because actually, when I look at that picture that you said you did in graduate school, it looks very different than what you're creating. So you might feel that it's the same, but I don't know how other people felt. But what I could see of it, it looked quite different. So, what do you feel about that creative process? And as someone who never did, any kind of art like you do, I was a musician for a number of years, so that's a kind of an art. But how you view the creative process and how Zen has maybe influenced that or not, or encouraged it or not.
Oh, a couple of things. One is someone looked at one of my artworks, I guess it's now a few months ago, and said, "Did you do that?" And and I said, "No." And uh, so I really don't know who does my artwork. Like, I do have a way of starting artworks, which I do, and that is to do I do this line here and this line here. So I have part of a nose, and then a nose needs a face, and a face needs a body, and a body needs maybe a chair to sit in, or maybe a friend, and maybe a dog, and it goes from there. And then in the last drawing, um, I needed rain, so I had God with the umbrella. But it seems like in the same way that supposedly our unconscious comes into play about 4/10 of a second before our conscious mind does. Um, I don't know who does this stuff. And there was a second part to your question, but I can't remember it.
Uh, yeah, about how you view the creative
Oh,
process
and
as
Zen.
Zen. Like, has it, in other words, to
Well,
me,
you asked me too. It was such a great
yeah.
question. How how has studying koans affected your sitting?
Hmm.
And my immediate thought, and this is my crazy brain that we all probably share, is well, if it doesn't, something's wrong. But and then if I can't put it into words, does that mean it doesn't affect my sitting? I have felt that my sitting is good. It was so beautiful sitting for the hour. We usually break it up into two periods. And one thing it, uh, so I don't know how I don't know how it affects my drawing. I worked for 6 months or 9 months with a friend, and she told me what was going on in her life, and then I drew pictures of what was going on in her life. So it wasn't personal, but it was personal because the stuff went through me and then out. At kimmosley.com, you can see those drawings. But how one thing, I guess it all affects everything that happens to us affects what we do. I don't know if particularly um, one thing or another. I've also been thinking about in the Talmud, it talks about how you shouldn't do any prayers until you've sat for an hour. And as we were sitting, I was thinking about that too. Uh,
Yeah, more specifically, I think what I was wondering, uh, you know, I view personally the unborn mind as like the creative source, which is you're it sounds like you're describing, what Master Bamke called the unborn Buddha mind, um, which I think we tap into when we sit. But for artists, it seems like an artist of any sort, if they're really truly creating and not just copying, have to tap into that same mind, although they may not term it in any particular way. But did you find, like, since you were an artist before and still are, did you find that getting into the mindset of Zen affected that creative impulse at all? That's kind of what I was asking, or did it increase it, or did it remain the same, or did you never even consider that? Um, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Um, I think for the most part it became fodder, that word fodder, um, just things that would spur my imagination. But again, imagination is, as I mentioned in the talk, it's not making things up, but it's really responding just to what's in front of me. And what Zen has taught me and what the koans have been teaching me is is something that also one of my teachers, Flynn Sparks, talks about. How simple are you willing to make it be, and coming directly to the what's in front of me. And I think my wife is so good at that. She's a Japanese um, tea ceremony master, and as complicated as the forms are in tea ceremony, it's just about a very efficient, simple sharing of a bowl of tea. And the world is so complicated, and it's so great that we have this. We can get this kind of break from the world with our sitting, with our the Dharma. It's also just been amazing to me that where does the rain come from, or any of the classic koans are over 1,000 years old, and that how did they survive? Such a simple question like that. And also the incredible wisdom. I've been reading, and we're actually starting a group on the book that Peter Levitt helped edit, The Essential Dogen. And I've been listening to that in my car too. And the wisdom of Dogen is just unbelievable. We have all these great thinkers today, but I never appreciated so much the thinkers of the past.
Is Dave still there? I guess not. I know, here he comes. Yeah, Lynn, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Kim, thank you so much for bringing your wonderful creative self to us this morning. Your drawings are absolutely delightful, and I suspect there actually is some talent there. I won't argue the point with you. And as a person who has had a checkered relationship with koans over my career with Al. I do appreciate the sort of equivalency with the creative force and working with the koans. I mean, Al always tells us don't think about them. Don't think about them. But I find myself, I think about them, I play with them, I sleep with the book, I do all kinds of strange things, to help me get to the answer. But yeah, I mean, in the end, I think it's just, you kind of like you put the stuff in there and then you go wash the dishes or you clean the house or take a walk or something and you just leave it alone. And then something comes out, and maybe it's a piece of art, or maybe it's a poem, or maybe it's the answer to the koan, or maybe it's not the answer to the koan. But there is that sense of it's coming through me. It's not, it doesn't seem like it's coming from me, me, little me. So anyway, I just, what a treat. And it's
Well,
lovely
thank
to
you.
meet you, Kim. And thank you so much. I hope you'll come back and see us again.
Thank you. Well, I'm just in the ones I showed, I'm just up to November, so I have a lot of pictures to show. One of my teachers, Peg, who I've mentioned before, when she was doing the Moo Koan, they put her out. This is at Great Vow in Portland, outside of Portland, and they put her out in a cabin and were bringing her food every, for meals. But that's all she was doing. And finally, she gave up, and they said, "Okay, now you have it." Uh, but it's a wonderful practice. Some people hate it, of course. There was one time we were doing koan study once a month on Wednesday nights. And as I got in my car, I got it. I got the koan. I understood it. And I thought, oh, I'm going to have to tell them. I'm going to have to tell them. By the time I got home, I lost it. I said, no, that's not it.
Yeah, Kim, I thank you. I thought that was wonderful. And I think what you did was gave me like a new way to look at art. I was
Oh,
sitting in front of a Jackson Pollock drip painting and asking, what does this mean? Is it like trying to solve a koan using only your mind?
it's yeah, I have a feeling that my wife and I spend a lot of time in our sunroom. We have dinner there every night, and we look out and we watch these squirrels, and there's a pond there, and so they like to drink sometimes, or they like to scratch on the limestone. Maybe they get something from that, but they don't have this problem that we have of the discursive mind. At one point, I wanted to have a lobotomy. I thought I could get closer.
Well, thank you. It was just wonderful. And I too hope you can come back.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we're about at time. Really appreciate the talk and discussion and seeing all the interesting artwork. And let's see, Roshi, any announcements?
No, I think you already made, oh yeah. Uh, well, just the one, reemphasize the one you made earlier that we will be meeting on Monday nights rather than Sunday when we do start. We don't know the start date yet, but we will get that information out to everyone as soon as we know. It's not going to be the first Monday in May, but it could be the second.
Oh, yeah, actually, we were talking about that for most of the people that are here. We're online, so just a
Yeah.
little more information. We are planning to begin sitting Monday nights at Unity Church in Melbourne. We're just not exactly sure when we'll start because just have to work out a few logistics first, but we'll let folks know.
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention that Sensei Andy is doing a retreat. It's a sitting retreat in Fort Myers area. It's going to be happening at a Unitarian church. That's from the 9th to the 12th of July. So anyone's invited to do it. I think the cost of the retreat with meals, the retreat itself is $350, and then you'd have to get your own accommodations, but there is a quite reasonable kind of a budget Hilton. I didn't realize they had a budget Hilton type property, but they do, which is very close to the Unitarian church there. So, it's in terms of the cost of retreats these days, it'll be pretty reasonable. And so you're all welcome to join that. sit for a few days. It's going to be more of a traditional Zen retreat setting, which we haven't done many of lately. So I really encourage everyone to do that. And if you haven't received information on that already, let us know and we'll get it out to you. I believe one email went out already. So yeah, everyone's welcome to come to that.
Will we still do talks on Sunday, or are we doing talks on Monday night? Or have you decided?
We were thinking of, instead of trying to do 2 days back to back, Sunday and Monday, just switching to Mondays.
Okay.
Yeah, it's possible we could add another night if there's good support for Monday night. We could add. They also have Thursday night open, and also they have space for occasional Saturdays for like one-day sittings or workshops. So once we get in there and see how it all works, it's very likely we'll certainly be expanding to offering some some Saturday programs, probably starting later this summer or early fall. And maybe another night of sitting, provided there are people who want to do it. So it all depends on participation, as it usually does.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Tim. Very much appreciated.
And Al, will I see you at 2?
Yes, we'll see you
Oh,
later.
good. Okay.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.